Okay, so what I want to do is, we know that there is a description in the Psukim of counting both days and weeks for Sfirat Omer. What I want to do is try to understand the relationship between these two countings. Are they one mitzvah, multiple mitzvah? Now we know in the Gemara already that they're theoretically distinguishable because you have the position that you should count days and not weeks, Bizman Hazeh. Now whether that's true biblically or not is unclear. So let's try to understand it. So let's start by looking at the Psukim and see what we get from the Psukim. Okay, is this? Just tell me if the screen share covers the Psukim also. Can you see? Do you see the Psukim now, or do you still see the source sheet?
No, source sheet.
Okay, so let me. Okay, it's Anish. I see what it is. Okay, so then let's share. Okay, so first we have the Psukim. Now you see the Psukim, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so first we have the Psukim in Parshat Emor. So there you get Usfartem lachem mimacharat haShabbat miyom haviachem et Omer atnufa sheva Shabbatot timimot tihena. And you'll count from the day after Shabbat, from the day that you bring the Omer, 7 weeks, 7 perfect weeks. Ad mimacharat haShabbat hashvi'it tisperu chamishim yom v'yikraftem mincha chadasha l'Adonai, until the day after Shabbat, the 7th Shabbat. You'll count 50 days, and you'll bring a new mincha. Okay, so based on this, right, what do you think? Are days and weeks, are they connected? Are they not connected? If they're connected, are they connected to the Omer? Are they not connected to the Omer? What would you say if you just had these psukim?
Could you scroll down like a quarter line?
Just these two psukim. Just these two. Yeah? You got it?
Yeah.
Okay, so what would you say? And again, I want to just try to get out the theoretical possibilities here. So,
it seems like it's using both days and weeks.
Okay, so one way of reading it is just saying, look, this is one integrated mitzvah, days and weeks, and that's all there is. And that's why in one pasuk you'll go with weeks, the next one you'll go with days. One of them starts with the karban of the Omer, and it ends with the karban of the Shtei Lechem. These are conceptually related. It's one big mitzvah, right? That's one way of reading it. Good. What's another way of reading it?
Just 7 weeks.
Yeah,
so,
it never says count days directly.
Right, so one possibility is to say, well, it doesn't really say days, right? So maybe weeks and days are therefore distinct, maybe, or weeks is the only mitzvah. Another way to say is, well, look, in the first pasuk, the 7 weeks, maybe they're linked to the Omer, but the 50 days, even if not explicit, maybe they're not linked to the Omer, meaning the bringing of the Karban Omer, so maybe they're distinct that way, right? Meaning there are different ways of reading these psukim. The other thing to note is that we have 2 psukim, right? Two times that this psukim come up. So, if we open the next one, do you see the second one opening? Opening. Second. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, so now these are the psukim as they appear in Re'eh. So there you get Shiva Shavuot Tisparlach Mechel Chamesh Bekamat Achel Ispar Sheva Shavuot. Count 7 weeks from the cutting of the Omer, from the cutting of the grain. Vasida Chag Shavuot L'Adonai Lecha Misad V'Vad Yecha Asher Titein Kasher Yivarecha Adonai. And you'll observe Shavuot, the festival of weeks. V'samach L'Adonai Lecha Atav V'Incha V'Vitecha V'Dechava Matcha V'Levi Asher B'Sharecha V'Ager V'Yadom V'Almana Asher B'Kirbecha V'Makom V'Sheivcha Adonai Lecha L'Shakein Shmo Sham. And you rejoice with God, with your son and your daughter, your slaves, male and female, the Leviim, the stranger, the orphans, etc. And you'll remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and you will keep all these laws. So in these psukim, what's conspicuously missing?
Days.
Days, right? So if you wanted to support a notion that weeks and days are distinct, so you got a good source here, which is that days isn't even mentioned. Now, if I move to the question, well, what are weeks dependent on? So here, weeks are connected to the Omer in terms of the cutting of the Omer, and they're connected to Chag HaShavuot. Not necessarily to the Karban. It doesn't say the Karban explicitly. Okay. So these are sort of the questions in the background, and you see how someone might derive different things from the psukim. So what I want to do is just go through the main positions. Again, you know me that normally I like being comprehensive. I'm trying to be somewhat complete, if not fully comprehensive. We're not missing main shitot. There are different permutations. I'll put that out as a in advance. There are different permutations, but we're going to just go for main one. So now, I put here to look at the Gemara again, but what I want to just note, we won't read it for the millionth time, but if you remember, in the Gemara you have the machloket. Nowadays, do you only count days and not weeks? Or do you count both, which already might depend on these distinctions? Okay. So let us look at how this shakes out le-halacha. So the Rambam is a very strong position of saying that there is only one mitzvah, days and weeks, and they are completely integrated. Any distinction, like you suggest in the Gemara, would only be rabbinic, but on a biblical level, these mitzvot are completely integrated, which was, as we said, a good way of reading at least the psukim as they appear in Emor. So this is the Rambam. The Rambam says, "HaMitzvah Kuf Samech Aleph," the 161st mitzvah. Hu shetzivanu litzpor miktirat haOmer tishav arba'im yom, to count from Sfirat Omer, from the cutting of the Omer, rather, 49 days. V'hu amru yit'aleh usvartem lachem mimacharat haShabbat. Count from the day after Shabbat. V'da, and you should know, ki kemo shenitchayvu beidin libnot shnot yovel shana shmita shmita. Just like when the beidin counts the yovel, you count year by year and shmita by shmita, meaning both units of 7 and units of 1. Kemo shebarni mashakadam kav chayav kol echad mimenu limnot yemei omer yom yom v'shavua shavua. He said there's no reason not to think that this is one mitzvah of both counting the units of 1 and the units of 7, because that's what you have by yovel. You count each year towards the yovel, and you count each unit of 7, each shmita. Admittedly, when it comes to the yovel, it is an obligation of Beit Din, as opposed to Sfirat HaOmer, that is an obligation of the individual. But this notion that the 1s and the 7s are integrated into a single mitzvah, that remains the same. Shu amar tisberu chamishim yom, v'amar shevu shavot tisparlach. And he says, how do I get it from the psukim? Because it says, count 50 days, and it says count 7 weeks. Now he has an interesting way of reading the psukim. He doesn't prove it from Emor. He proves it from the fact, dafka, the opposite of the way we read Re'eh. Right? We said Re'eh only mentions weeks. So we said maybe you'd think weeks is separate from days. He says, no. Conclude the opposite. The fact that Re'eh doesn't bother saying days, it only says weeks, means that you just have to draw an equivalence between Emor and Re'eh, because the Torah can't contradict itself. And therefore, in one place it says days, in one place it says only weeks. That tells you that these mitzvot are completely equivalent. Just like the single years and those 7 years, the Shemitah, are one mitzvah for the purpose of Yovel, Kain Sfirat Omer mitzvah achat. And so too, the counting of Sfirat Omer is one mitzvah. V'chein manautam kol mishe kadamnu mitzvah achad. And everyone who counted mitzvahs before us, meaning before the Rambam, counted as one mitzvah. V'ha'emet masha asu bazeh. V'al yitacha omram. And he says, and don't make a mistake, because what did the Gemara says in Menachot Samech Vav that we've read 10 times? That mitzvah l'mimnei yomei, mitzvah l'mimnei shvuei. That there's a mitzvah to count days and weeks, which implies that those are two separate mitzvah. V'tachshov she'ein shtei mitzvah. Don't read it that way. Ki chol chelet v'chelet michelkei eiz mitzvah sheyu lahem chalakim. Because any mitzvah which has multiple parts, mitzvah lazor chelet kumimena, you have a mitzvah to do each part. V'amnama yushtei mitzvah elu amru minyana mitzvah minyana shvo mitzvah. If what it had meant was these are separate mitzvot, it would have said there's a mitzvah to count the weeks and a mitzvah to count days. Rather, there's a mitzvah to count days and weeks. V'zeh ma shelo le'alem l'mi sheyitom hadibur ki ata shetomar chova la'asot kach v'kach hine lo yitchayev v'zeh amar shubala yimutzvah b'yatzma. If I say do X and Y, that doesn't mean X and Y are conceptually distinct. Right? If I say sweep the floor and mop the floor, what I mean is clean the floor. Right? I don't mean there's a mitzvah. Right, one command, sweep, one mop. I said clean the floor, and then I tell you what that entails: sweep, clean, sweep, mop, etc. V'haraya brura. What's the proof? Because we count each night. Every night we say today is 8 nights, which is 1 week and 1 day. If they were not integrated, so then you would only count the weeks on the end. Meaning, you'd say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, which is 1 week, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, which is 2 weeks. But you wouldn't count 8, which is 1 week and 1 day. Therefore, he says further, if you thought it was 2 mitzvot, you'd say 2 brachot. You would say on counting days and counting weeks. We know that's not what you do. The mitzvah is days and weeks. Days and weeks. And he says, he assumes it's time bound and therefore it is only men who are chayav. So the Rambam has a very unequivocal position. He says, when the Gemara says it's a mitzvah to count days and weeks, I'm summarizing it for you, Yosef. The Rambam says the mitzvah is to count days and weeks. It's one big mitzvah. It's integrated. Proof, the way he understands the psukim is Emor discusses days and Re'eh discusses weeks, and you draw an equivalence. When it says count days and weeks, those are just 2 parts of one mitzvah. The fact that we have only one bracha proves that it's one mitzvah, and the fact that the way we count, as he understands it, is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, which is 1 day and 1 week and 1 day, 9, which is 1 week and 2 days, and that you count each day both what it is as a day and what it is as a week plus a fraction, means all of that builds up to prove that there is only one integrated mitzvah.
Rabbi.
Yes.
2 things. One, just because part of the mitzvah is X and Y, so he's saying it's not 2 mitzvahs. It's 1 mitzvah, 2 parts. Why can't you say that neither let's say the day part of it is not the mitzvah, but the week part of it is. It's just, obviously, we use days to count weeks. I mean, otherwise, you can't really count weeks.
You could theoretically say that, you only count on the week, right? You count day 7, day 14, right? And however you figure out that it's day 7, right? There's no mitzvah in the process, right? You could have theoretically said that, right? And we'll see that people will say something like that.
Also, when he says we have a proof for this is when we say it's 1 week and a day, right, or whatever, right? Isn't that only after the fact? Meaning that
correct. So that's the better question. Is that you didn't necessarily have to say that. You could have said that there is no such mitzvah, and we'll see that all Rishonim will think that there is no such mitzvah, right? The mitzvah is only at the conclusion of a week, which in fact would indicate that this is not true.
Right.
Correct. Correct. Now, the only thing I would note, I copied the Grizz again. I don't want to read through the whole Grizz. We've read it before, but I copied it again. The Grizz just points out that obviously if you hold this, right, that the mitzvah d'oraisa is one integrated mitzvah, so then it helps us understand that when the Gemara says that the Shita holds Zeichel HaMikdash counts only days and weeks, it's a completely new takana of Zeichel HaMikdash, right? Meaning, remember we talked about different types of Zeichel HaMikdash, but when the Grizz says that there are certain types of Zeichel HaMikdash where Zeichel HaMikdash isn't just the motivation, but it's the Tzuras HaMitzvah, that it's a completely new type of mitzvah called Zeichel HaMikdash, you understand what a Meimar is the Machlok is a Meimar and Abaye. That if you say that this is the type of Zeichel HaMikdash where remembering the Mikdash motivated it, but the mitzvah itself is a normal mitzvah, so if it's one big mitzvah, you have to copy all pieces. But in order to say something like, you only count days when it's an integrated mitzvah, you have to be machadesh that this is a unique type of Zeichel HaMikdash mitzvah, and that's exactly what the Grizz says within the Rambam. Okay? So we won't read back through the Grizz, but that is the Rambam, and how it would play out in the understanding of the rabbinic law. Okay. But Rabbeinu Yerucham, who we've seen, I think, a few times this year, he's one of the Provençal Rishonim. Rabbeinu Yerucham takes a different approach. And he says as follows in number 6. You see it? We're good?
Yeah.
V'nir elan mishum dichtiv sheva shavuot tispar lach uktiv nami miyom havichem et omer v'gomer sheva shabatot miotiena nimtza shelo nichdeva sfirat shavuot ki im gabei ha'omer aval sfirat hayamim lo ktiv gabei omer. So he says, first point, there are two separate mitzvot. But not only are there two separate mitzvot, but they are fundamentally different. How are they different? So he says, let's read the psukim carefully again. Okay? So I want to show you how he reads the psukim. So he says as follows. Okay? We have two psukim. The psukim in Dvarim, as we mentioned, only mention days or weeks. Which ones? Sheva Shavuot Tispar Lach. They only mention what? Weeks. And there it seems to say, is it connected to the Omer? Yes. Right? Me'achel chamesh bekama. Count weeks from the bringing of the Omer. What about in Vayikra? Ushvartem lochan b'machara Shabbat miyom aviyachem et omer tenufa sheva Shabbatot temot tiyena ani machara sheva shvi tispru chamishim yom. In this pasuk in Tet Zayin, does counting the 50 days, is it connected to any starting event? Not really, right? Count 50 days up to that date, which doesn't quite as clearly connected to the Omer. That's how he reads this. Right? It just says count 50. So therefore, he's mechadesh the following. What? You're right, you could. Right? And we saw that many Rishonim said that it does, because you just read it back to the previous pasuk. But he reads it very specifically as follows. He says, Sheva Shabbatot Timotiena Nimtza Shalom Nichtav Asirat Shavuot Ki Im Gabei Omer. The mitzvah of the weeks only is written in context of counting from the Omer. Right? And if you look back, even in Vayikra, the psukim that are the phrase that's right after the Omer is Miyom Aviyachem Omer Tuvua Sheva Shabbatot Timiot Tien, is the counting of weeks. So Rabbeinu Yerucham says in both places in which weeks are mentioned, they are explicitly connected to the Omer. Aval Sfirat Hayamim Lo Ktiv Gabe Omer. But the counting of the days is at least separated. So therefore he's Mechadesh. Nimtza Disfirat Hayamim Hu Min HaTorah Afil Bizman Hazeh. So therefore he says, first of all, these are two different mitzvot. Second of all, one Bizman Hazeh is biblical and one is rabbinic. Remember we said, is it biblical, is rabbinic? He says, I'll split the difference. Weeks are only ever mentioned with the cutting of the Omer. And therefore weeks, the mitzvah of weeks is a separate mitzvah which needs the actual bringing of the Omer. The counting of days is a separate mitzvah which is not dependent. And therefore he says, Aval afil bizman hazeh, shvir shvot bizman di'ika Omer, he says, you know the Rambam's problem? The Rambam has a problem, which is, if it's two mitzvot, why don't you make two brachot? So what's his answer?
He says they're just both connected to one.
No, that's the Rambam. But the Rambam says, I'll prove to you it's only one mitzvah because there's only one bracha. What's Rabbeinu Yerucham's answer, who thinks that there are two separate mitzvot? One which depends on the Omer and one which does not. He says that when there was a Beis HaMikdash, what did you do?
We had two brachot.
You had two brachot. Simple. Vayimevarchin zel zeh bizman shemeik mikdash kayam. V'hainu tichtiv ad memacharat haShabbat hashvi'it tisperu chamishim yom. V'havi le'mechlav ad macharat ela ratzon macharat svor v'ad macharat ratzon omer shlo tel b'yom aviyachem el macharat u'bizman hazeh anisofrim l'shavuot zecher le'mikdash. And he says, nowadays we make one bracha, which is the counting of the days, but we don't make a bracha on the counting of the weeks because that's only Zecher L'Mikdash. Now, according to him, therefore, what was the machloket in the Gemara? Probably the Shita holds that it's days and weeks. Holds that days are biblical and the weeks are Zeichel Mikdash or rabbinic, whatever. And the Shita that holds you only count days, how would he presumably understand that Shita? That you don't bother with something which is only Zeichel Mikdash or something like that. Or maybe he thinks that even the days are only Zeichel Mikdash. But for him, it makes sense that you could have a machloket that nowadays do you only count the days and not the weeks? Because he says, look, the days are the only biblical one, and the machloket in the Gemara is, do you also count weeks as Zeichel HaMikdash, but you don't make a bracha on it? Or maybe you don't even bother counting them, or maybe even days are Zeichel HaMikdash, but that is the machlokes, right? Whether his drasha is right. But once you see these as two separate issues, it makes sense that in the Gemara there's going to be a machloket about whether you count both or you only count one. Okay? So that is Rabbeinu Yerucham. There are two separate mitzvot. In the Beit HaMikdash, they in fact make two separate brachot. Nowadays, we only make a brach on the days and weeks. We count, but that's Zeichel HaMikdash, so it doesn't get a bracha. That is how Rabbeinu Yerucham understands the maskana of the sugya, though you could see different ways within the Gemara as how he understood Abaye and Ameimar. Okay. The Or Sameach builds on this a bit, and he writes as follows. He says, Re'ei b'sefer ha-mitzvot l'Rabbeinu be'ur da'ato ba'orach. He said, look at the Rambam. The Rambam Shita is clear, look at it at length. Omnam, bi'igrot ha-Rama, in the letters of the Rama, Ramera Alevi Abulafia, ha'erich, Diminyan ha-shuvot hu min ha-Torah dafka bizman shebein ha-mikdash kayam. He holds like Rabbeinu Yerucham. The Rama holds like Rabbeinu Yerucham, that the counting of the weeks is only biblical when there is a Beit HaMikdash. Ukmo dichtiv mechel chamesh bekama sheva shavuot. Because this counting of weeks depends on the cutting of the Omer. Aval minyan hayamim hu min haTorah tamid. But the counting of days is always biblical. Af bizman hazeh. V'al zeh amru. And he now takes it back to the Gemara and says, that's what the Gemara said, that Amei marmane yomei v'lo mane shavuei, my time is zeichel mikdashu, ki minyan ha-shavuot, eino min ha-Torah. Because he said, counting the weeks is not biblical. V'im tishal madua, and if you'll tell me, well, why are weeks not biblical but days are? Al zeh amar, omer, gzerat melechu, you'll just say, it's a gzerat katuv. That's what the Torah tells you. Uvesod Elokim miyavo. Who can figure out what God wanted? V'kein advarim b'Rabbeinu Yerucham, and that's what Rabbeinu Yerucham says. The Or Sameach says uledaati be'emet sod Hashem l'reyav shegilu l'ratinu ba'alei Talmud. He said this is indeed quite a secret, and he says, you know what this teaches me? I'll use this principle to explain something else. The Gemara in Rosh Hashanah tells you as follows. The Alfei Tashlumin lekarbanot Ri'iyah Uchagiga Ba'atzeret Kol Shiva. So there's a normal rule. You're supposed to bring the Chagiga on the first day of Yom Tov, but you're allowed to bring it all 7 days of Yom Tov. But now that makes sense for which two holidays? Pesach and Shavuot, because how many days are Pesach and Shavuot?
What do you mean? The first, like.
How long is the whole holiday? 7 days. So it makes sense. You bring in the first day, or you can do Tashlumin for the whole holiday. What about Shavuot? Shavuot, the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah tells you that on Shavuot you can also bring it for 7 days, even though how many days is Shavuot biblically? 1. So the Gemara there asks, how do you know? Maybe it should be 1 day, because Shavuot, unlike Pesach and Shavuot, is only 1 day. So why do you know you can bring the Karbanot all 7 days? It doesn't make sense. The holiday is only 1 day. And the Gemara answers, Amar Rava atu yomei maninan Shavuot lo maninan. Rava gives this cryptic answer. Do we only count days and not weeks? Vod Chag HaShavuot. It's called the holiday of weeks. Nimtza de darshei de Chag HaShavuot. So from here we derive that you're allowed to bring the karban the whole week, even though the holiday is only 1 day. And he says, with the secret of Rabbeinu Yerucham and the Ramah, I can explain to you why you're allowed to bring karbanot for 7 days. Let me explain to you the secret. We say count days, and then sanctify Shavuot for 1 day. Manei Shavuot. But where is this holiday of weeks? If there's a mitzvah to count weeks, where is it? How can it be Shavuot is only 1 day? Answer: Kadesh Chag Shavuot lekarbanot haregel. There is a 7-day holiday of Shavuot. It's not 7 days of holiday, but it's 7 days in which you're allowed to bring the karban of the Chagiga, and therefore there is a halachic implication to the day count and the week count. The day count is Mekadesh, the holiday of Shavuot, which indeed is only 1 day, but the mitzvah to count weeks has a implication in weeks, and that is that you get a whole week to bring the karbanot. And if Shavuot were to fall on Shabbat, when you're not allowed to bring the karban chagiga, you would only bring the chagiga in the tashlumin days, meaning the Shavuot, which is the manifestation of the mitzvah to count weeks. And this is forever. And he says the counting of days is therefore forever because it manifests itself even without a Beit HaMikdash. But the uniqueness of the Shavuot of weeks, the counting of weeks, that's not forever because that's only if you have a Beit HaMikdash and need days to bring the karban. And therefore, the count of the days, which depends not on the Beit HaMikdash, is forever. But the count of the weeks, there is such a thing as a Shavuot week-long holiday, which is the manifestation of the counting of weeks. What that is the 7 days to bring the Karban. But that doesn't exist when there's no Beit HaMikdash. L'chein k'tiv, and that's why we say that the weeks specifically are Sheva Shavuot, Tispar Lach Me'achel Chamesh B'Kamat Tachel Ispor. That we connect that to the Omer. Perush Mizmana Omer, Vasita Chag Shavuot, V'lo k'tiv, Minyan Yamim Klal. The Shavuot, the week of, the holiday of weeks, that only exists, the week-long holiday of Shavuot, rather than Chag HaBikurim, which is 1 day. That only exists when there's a Beit HaMikdash and you bring the Omer, and therefore there's a mitzvah to count weeks. V'u'inyan mechudash. This is a chiddush. Bizman she'Beit HaMikdash kayam v'hakarbanot krevim bo. V'zeh omek hadavar l'me'ayim. V'chein svarat Rabbi Elazar da'atzeret ki Shabbat mishachar Beit HaMikdash l'inyan avelut. And that's why, even though Shavuot is only 1 day, it knocks off all 7 days of Avelut, because it has a 7-day status. And that's why we still read psukim about Shavuot on the 2nd day in Chutz La'aretz. And he says, furthermore, this will explain one of the drashot that we saw on Daf Samach Hayam and Bet. That Rabbi Shmuel had said, Amar lo shote, Katuv echad tisper chemishim yom, Amar Rava kul itlu percha, etc. Except for Abaye, the Amar Abaye mitzvah lemimne yomei, mitzvah lemimne shvuei. That you have to count days and weeks. V'tzarech be'er demai Amar dilma k'da Abaye, deman cholek al Abaye, who argues, v'od disfir Shavuot yalaf Abaye mikra deshiva Shavuot, etc. And he says the proof is as Yishav Davar Dilma Kedabai the Mitzvah Limnei Shvuei Afis Man Shebein Mikdash Kayam after Kavan Haregal Inakrevin Tashlumin L'chein Barshat Amor Blon is called Klal Chag Shavuot Rak Yom Tov Dat Zeret Katav Gam Kein Mitzvah L'Sfor Shavuot Avol Be'emet Machar Shabbat U'Machar Yom Tov etc. Okay, I won't go into this proof too much. But basically, the counting of the days is from the day after Pesach. But not the mitzvah of Shavuot, which has nothing to do with that. That depends on the actual bringing of the Omer. So what you have now is two positions. The Rambam, who says it's one integrated mitzvah, always, whether there's a Beit HaMikdash, not a Beit HaMikdash, always one bracha, that's it. Rabbeinu Yerucham, mitzvah to count days, doesn't depend on the Omer. Mitzvah to count weeks, does depend on the bringing of the Omer. The extension of this by Yor Sameach is this explains why. First by the Ramah, the extension of the Ramah is explicitly that's why nowadays there's a machlokas about counting days and weeks in the Gemara, and the Yor Sameach extends it more, and he says this notion that there's really two things going on at once explains why in the time of the Beit HaMikdash there is actually a certain level of which Shavuot is a week-long holiday, just like Pesach and Sukkot. Namely, you're allowed to bring the Karban Chagiga for 7 days, but the Shavuot that we know that's only 1 day, or 2 days from Chutz La'aretz, that doesn't depend on the Omer, that's biblical nowadays, and that exists even when there's no Beit HaMikdash, and therefore the daily mitzvah is forever counting days, and the 1 day Shavuot, the week-long depends on the Omer, only exists in the Beit HaMikdash, and has manifestations and implications for the Beit HaMikdash, for the Karbanot for 7 days, but this does not exist at all for the but this does not exist. The mitzvah to count weeks at all does not exist. Bisman hazeh. So that is possibility 2. Possibility 3. We have 10 minutes, so I'll try to at least get possibility 3 out, and if we have one more day. Yeah, okay. Let's try to do one more. And then tomorrow we'll finish off and summarize it. The Sfat Emet also agrees that there's 2 separate mitzvot. We already read this, but I put it again. He thinks that there's 2 mitzvot, except he thinks that the opposite is true of Rabbeinu Yerucham. And I'll just read you the key since we read it before. and he says as follows here. Why would you only have right Tamahani lo matzinu kazeh the mabekach the zeichel hamikdashi lama lo nasa b'shleimut kamo she'asu bizman hamikdash? Why don't we just? What is the zeichel hamikdash? Only counting days and weeks. So he says the efshar lefaresh the be'emet parsharei katav stam sheva shavot tisparlach v'asita chag shavuot v'sham lo nizkar me'omer shtei alechem klal. He reads Re'eh the opposite of Rabbeinu Yerucham, and he says when in Parshat Re'eh we only have 7 weeks. It doesn't actually say from the Omer. It says from when you cut the grain, but that doesn't say the Omer. So maybe that means mashma des mitzvat svira zo he litzorah chag shavot ba'atzmo shebem nikra kein shavuot. He says maybe it's the opposite of Rabbeinu Yerucham. Maybe weeks doesn't depend on the Omer. It is in an independent mitzvah that creates chag shavuot and applies even when you don't bring the Omer, even without a Bein HaMikdash. Rak beparshat Amor gabe Omer va'keves kalim yom aviyachem tisperu chamishim yom. But days they are from when you count, from when you bring the Omer. Lachen yesh lomer dahani shtei mitzvot sfirat hayamim mitzad akravat haOmer ushtei alechem. So he says the opposite of Rabbeinu Yerucham. He says the days is dependent on the Omer. Ushvirat hashavuot l'shem hachag be'atzmo. But the counting of weeks is only for Chag Shavuot. So we said, "V'hashta Amar Ameimer dechol mitzvot she'ein noagin bezman hazeh lo matzinu lem zeicher." But he has a little twist, right? You could have said, therefore, that nowadays weeks are biblical and days are not. But he can't say that because Gemara says the opposite. So he's mechadesh this very, very complicated logic, which is the following: the existence of each mitzvah depends on the Omer, and therefore nowadays nothing is biblical. But if nothing is biblical because them being a mitzvah depends on the Omer, why is it that we only might commemorate days and not weeks? So he says, days is a mikdash mitzvah, and therefore it's worth making a zecher lemikdash. Weeks, they depend on the Omer, but they're not a mikdash mitzvah. They're a holiday mitzvah that happens to depend on the bringing of the Omer. And therefore, when you set up a Zecher L'Mikdash, you set up a Zecher L'Mikdash only for those things that are fundamentally Mikdash related and not Mikdash related. Now, again, you could have a theoretical position that nowadays you only count weeks because they're not dependent on the Omer, and you don't count days, but no one seems to actually take that position. So now we have 3 positions. The Rambam that it's one integrated mitzvah, Rabbeinu Yerucham that it's separate mitzvah, only days are independent of the Omer and apply nowadays, weeks depend on the Omer and might not, and the Sfat Emet, which is they both depend on the Omer and the halacha, but one is conceptually linked to the Omer and is a mikdash one, i.e. days, and therefore you commemorate it nowadays. On the other hand, weeks happen to be dependent on the Omer, but they're not a mikdash one, so they're not worth remembering maybe Bizman Hazeh. Okay, I gave you an English summary here from Ray Tarragon. So let me, maybe just to make it clear, and we'll look at some nafkaminas tomorrow. Yeah, you know what, let's read this summary quickly, and then we'll look at the nafkaminas tomorrow, okay? Maybe it'll be a bit of a shorter shir. He writes, right? And this will just, for those of you who are lost, it's a good summary. A previous shir explored the status of Omer, counting on Pesach Shavuot in the era after Korban HaMikdash. The 2 absolute positions of the Rambam, that the mitzvah remains midoraita on a biblical level even without the Mikdash, and Tosfot, that the mitzvah applies nowadays midirabanan on a rabbinic level, were presented. In addition, we encountered 2 compromise positions, each based in some measure on the position of a Meimar, who would count days but not weeks, since the Omer serves merely as a zecher, a commemoration of the mitzvah's performance in the Mikdash. According to Rabbeinu Yerucham, the counting of days is independent of the Mikdash, while the counting of weeks exists only as a rabbinic decree after the destruction of the Mikdash. Conversely, the Sfat Emet, based primarily on the verses, claims that the counting of weeks is geared towards scheduling Shavuot and exists independently of the Mikdash. By contrast, the counting of days depends upon the Mikdash and the offerings, and it therefore applies only midrabana after the Churban. Each of these positions, as different as they are from one another, assumes a distinction between the two counting schemes, each possessing a unique function. The issue is not necessarily accepted by all Rishonim, etc. As stated above, Rabbeinu Yerucham premises his stance upon viewing the two counting schemes as different cycles and distinct mitzvot. In fact, he even questions the absence of two separate brachot. The obligation of tefillin contains two separate mitzvot, and therefore requires two separate brachot, at least according to Tosfot. Shouldn't the same be true of counting days and weeks? Hence, he concludes that the counting of days and weeks no longer applies on the Doraita level after the destruction of the Mikdash, and his bracha is therefore suspended. According to Rabbeinu Yerucham, though, during the time of the Mikdash, two brachot were indeed recited over Sfirot Omer, one for the mitzvah of counting days and one for the mitzvah of counting weeks. As we saw, presumably the Sfat Emet would also subscribe to this two mitzvah principle by the very fact that one counting remains midoraita after the Churban, while the other exists only midarabanan. These positions are heavily based on the simple reading of Abaye's statement Menachot. There is a mitzvah to count days and a mitzvah to count weeks. The formulation implies that the two mitzvot in fact exist. By contrast, the Rambam in Sefer Mitzvot clearly catalogs both counts as one integrated mitzvah. In an extraordinary elaboration upon the structure of this mitzvah, the Rambam asserts that the incorporation of the two counting schemes are a single mitzvah. He likens this incorporation of the relationship between counting to Shemitah, the seventh or sabbatical year, and counting to Yovel, schemes which are obviously related. After counting 7 rounds of Shemitah, the 50th year is automatically defined as Yovel. Similarly, after counting 7 days, a week of Sfirot Omer is reached. As proof of the integration of the two, the Rambam points out the opposite of separate brachot, which, as we saw, Rabbeinu Yerucham thinks there were two brachot. According to the Rambam, a second proof is provided by the fact that we mention the weeks each night, and not only in the conclusion of 7-day units. This implies that the mention of weeks is meant merely to elaborate the counting of days, but not as a separate week-based counting. But as we'll see, right, if you wanted to argue that these are separate, what would you say? That maybe we don't mention the weeks every day. So what we'll do tomorrow is just spell out, right, the Rambam takes as an assumption that we don't count days and weeks, and that we count days and weeks every night. And that there's one bracha. We already saw that Rabbeinu Yerucham challenges the one bracha claim, as we'll see tomorrow. It may not be true that every shita holds that we actually count weeks every night. It might be we only count weeks at the end of the week. And that would explain a Rabbeinu Yerucham or Sfat Emet like position. So tomorrow we'll just do sources 9, 10, 11, 12.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
Is there any proof that we used to have two brachot?
Nope, he just speculates it.
So,
Correct. It's speculation.
makes sense.
But tomorrow, Rabbeinu Yerucham claims it. What we'll do tomorrow is do a few nafkaminas. And if we have time, and if you're interested, I'll show you that the Rav is quoted in Rabbi Shapiro's book on Pesach, Shavuot, and Sfirot Omer as saying that this might actually depend on the ta'amim that we have, right? The trup might actually point in different directions. So we'll do that tomorrow, okay? So we just have the sources, a few sources left, and like I said, I've attached English summaries to each of this, like I read through now. But we'll do this tomorrow.